And Adrian, Arvin and I would like to thank you for giving your time to talk with us and share some of the work you've done and the lessons that you've learned over time. And as we're going to wrap up our time together, we are going to end where we started, and we're going to give it 1 second. And we have, once again, this idea of bridges. And I love that statement that there are many different types of bridges and that we have to be able to look at it uniquely for every patient, every family, and how they do that process. I'm going to give a real quick summary of where we've been today, because we have been going on a journey around transition and heard lots of different perspectives. And so if we could, am I in charge of this? Nope. Can you go to the next slide? The what? Oh, perfect. Look at that. You know, one thing that we learned is that timing is important, right? And one of the issues often around transition is that it occurs too late, the transfer leap. Someone ages at a transition age, 18, 21 years of age, and they feel like they're going to have to cross this chasm on their own. Or, as we've talked about, that there's a lot of different transition tools, and yet transition sometimes is done incompletely. And so often our young adults and our families feel like they're left to come to navigate this on our own. And hopefully, one of the things around timing we've heard over and over again is that transition needs to be longitudinal, meaning it needs to occur early, 12, 14 years of age. And we need to build a great, strong bridge that starts with an on-ramp. How do we prepare our young adults for those skills? Really, the metal crossing the bridge is a short time, and there's an off-ramp that even when they've moved to the adult world, transition isn't done, that we have to make sure that there is safety nets. There's this complication, right? People often confuse transfer, the physical movement from one location to another, with transition, which is that purposeful and planned process to move towards adulthood. And I think that's a really key point that we've highlighted today, and hopefully we can take away. Another key point we talked about is transition's complicated. We often in the medical field think about our side of things, the healthcare portion, but I love that we had speakers thinking about the financial implications and the legal implications. We can talk about educational implications. We can talk about sexuality and gender. We can talk about all these different components. People are complicated. They're not just one thing. And often we do transition in our different silos, right? We don't do a good job communicating. I would really want us to shift our thinking, and why we've done this conference with different stakeholders working together is that transition's really like a puzzle. Each of these different domains is really important, but they also touch each other. And if one of those pieces is missing, it impacts the whole puzzle. So we have to think of people completely. We can't just think and deal with just one part of who they are. So it's really important to have a holistic view of transition. And the final one that we've talked about a little bit over and over again is that there's different stakeholders at the table. And often it can feel like there's a transition tug of war, that people are pulling different directions. The young adult is going for independence. The parents are not quite ready to let go. The adult providers, the pediatric providers are kind of trying to understand their part of this, and it can be really challenging. I'm going to steal the slide. I'm sure, Bev, I was facing the other direction, but I'm sure this is the slide that you were showing, that really transition is this process. And I really like to frame it as a dance. I got my 3 daughters who are sitting at the table back there, and they can probably attest to you that once upon a time we would have dance parties, and when they were young, they thought that I was an amazing dancer. That has changed. But, you know, as a parent, you know, having a dance party with your kids, everybody's having a good time. They look at you and they're learning from you. They like the type of music that you're putting on. But as they get older, they learn what music is important to them. They decide what dancing should look like to them. And we have to give them that freedom. We have to let them start taking the lead. And so really transition is like a dance. We might kind of help and shape and teach them early on, but eventually that's only to the point of giving that away so that they can be the stakeholder, that they can be the CEO of their care, that they can take over. So when we kind of think about this, we want to end with this idea that transition is really equal to inclusion. Transition is about how do we not get people to become adults, because the truth is people are going to get older and they're going to become adults. We want them to go into adulthood, but we want them to go into adulthood in a way which they're also valued. So their perspectives and who they are brings value to all of us as a community. So we talked about this purpose of transition being about equity and about centering those young adults so that who they are can be brought and valued within our community. And I will leave us with one last quote from a famous Pittsburgher, Mr. Rogers. And he said this quote, that transitions are almost always signs of growth, but they can also bring feelings of loss. To get somewhere new, we may have to leave somewhere else behind. And this is so true. And I love Mr. Rogers and some of his quotes. And he highlights that transition is not just one thing. It's complicated, right? That you can't just have one emotion. I love that we celebrate the graduation, that they're moving into adulthood, but it is complicated. There are a lot of feelings held at the same time, and we have to admit that so that we can process and work through it. So let's go ahead and start our journey of transition, and we will end with a little bit of time for Q&A if anybody has questions, that we'll open it up to the audience, and then we can use our collective knowledge to kind of support each other through it. So if anybody has any questions online or in the audience, we're happy to open it up for a few minutes before we move on to lunch. Well, it looks like people may just be hungry. So why don't we go ahead and close out? If there's questions in the chat, I'm sure they can pass that on to our team and we can share answers, and we'll be able to have some discussion in the room together over lunch. So thank you everybody for coming here, and go ahead and jump out of the room and grab some lunch and come back here and let's mingle.